Can you talk about how narcissistic racism is? I can, and I'll provide citations because clearly I do not have this lived experience. So before I get into that, let me be clear. My fellow pales, I am talking to you. This is a we-us situation. I don't know what the identity of this person is. I suspect they are not pale because most of us do not know to ask this question. So, people of color, you are welcome to sit and listen to this video and provide your feedback. I'm not talking to you because I know you already know this, okay? Learned everything I know about this from y'all. Also why I'm including citations. There are many empirical articles on narcissism and why it is racist, and I still, looking to answer this question, was particularly fond of this one. It's not new, it's 1980. I feel like it answered the question very directly, and it was looking at a literature review of up to that time, so you can only imagine what we have since then. I like how clearly they laid out how narcissistic tendencies and the DSM align with racist behaviors. Now, I know the DSM has had a lot of issues. I do not know this as well as a clinical psychologist probably could tell you. That's not the point of this video, but let's look at what this says. The DSM contains a description of narcissistic personality disorder, which is also classic in racist individual, and the criteria are the following. 1. A grandiose sense of self-importance or uniqueness. This fits the racist's supposed racial superiority. 2. Preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. Clearly, the wish to dominate another racial group fits here, as well as, I don't know how to say this word, as the Malthusian principles of the rightness of whiteness and the Teutonic standard of white beauty. Never even heard of those? Stay tuned on the rightness of whiteness. I have research on that. Just didn't call it that. Exhibitionistic, requires constant attention and admiration, such as wearing white sheets or swastikas. Wow! Didn't notice that before I put it on a green screen. Gonna have to block some of that. What I focus on is the much more subtle ways before it gets to this point, such as the obsession with certain characteristics that are considered white, and how much people freak out when, say, a Little Mermaid doesn't look like them. Responds to criticism, indifference of others, or defeat with either cool indifference or with marked feelings of rage, inferiority, shame, humiliation, or emptiness. The phenomena of white backlash and the feelings that blacks are being pushy. 2 of the following: lack of empathy, inability to recognize how others feel. Racists could not possibly recognize how their inferiors, in quotes, feel, otherwise they would not behave in such an unempathetic manner. It's also why the white working class are bamboozled into rolling back labor rights and then being shocked when it impacts us. 2, entitlement, expectation of special favors with reactions of surprise and anger when others don't comply. Racists are always surprised and angry when the inferiors don't accede to their wishes. 3, interpersonal exploitativeness, takes advantage of others to indulge his own desires or for self-aggrandizement with disregard for personal integrity and rights of others. They say his, this is an article in the 80s, it's also hers, could even be a theirs. 4, relationships characteristically vacillate between the extremes of over-idealization and devaluation. The characterization of black people as, yes, it says blacks, again, this was the 80s. I still don't like it, as being primitive and yet committing extreme acts of cultural plagiarism, such as the suntan phenomenon. Okay, do y'all see why I included this article even though it does make me grimace twice? That was bars. Most violent forms of narcissistic rage arise in those individuals for whom a sense of absolute control over an archaic environment is indispensable. It is this need for a sense of absolute control which the racist feels justified his or her self-given right to violate another's territory by either a physical attack, segregation, or discrimination. The territory in this country being, for example, the individual's right to adequate health care, education, and housing wherever he can afford it, or she. Now, also a point of using an older article is see how this has not weathered well, even for my fellow pales. I have another video coming out next week on my YouTube on canary in the coal mine. As soon as you roll back rights for someone else, it does come back to haunt you. We don't have healthcare in the U.S. We're the only developed nation that does not have universal healthcare. Why? So poor white folks back in the day were convinced we would rather not have healthcare than let black people have it too. Biting ourselves in the asses. Now, what I look at with a lot of this is much more subtle than before it gets to, like I said, the white hats. This is my dissertation. It is available for free in my bio. I don't charge for this because, again, I look into racism as things that I need to learn and unpack, and also since I'm a class researcher, it would be racist of me not to include looking at how class and race intersect, because the class system in America and in many countries is built on race structures. And I am not the authority on race. I cannot be. I do not have that lived experience, so I do not charge for this. The first paper of my dissertation is what my book is on, Unwritten Rules of Work for the Working Class. What are they as they move on? And then the second paper, I looked at how does this align with the white supremacy framework by Tima Okun and Kenneth Jones. Several videos on this. It's in my Culture Frameworks playlist. I always get a lot of hate when I talk about it, and clearly it hasn't worked to shut me up. So, white supremacy is used to regulate, legitimize, and distribute privilege to white individuals. For example, white supremacy has impacted access to housing through residential redlining and neighborhood segregation. Additionally, it permeates our workplaces. Okun and Jones and Okun have argued some workplace norms uphold white supremacy culture. Some of these are perfectionism, quantity over quality, sense of urgency, defensiveness, worship of the written word, only one right way, paternalism, either or thinking, power hoarding, fear of open conflict, and individualism. I'm the only one, progress is bigger, more, objectivity, and right to comfort. The white supremacy culture framework posits that organizations may unintentionally support this white supremacy culture and make it difficult, if not impossible, to be inclusive of non-white cultures. I go on. I want you to focus on that one right way one. One right way is when somewhere only values one way of doing things. If people are exposed to that one right way, they'll just do it because it's the correct way. People who do not adhere to that way of doing things are perceived as having something wrong with them. You know who this immediately reminds me of is neurodivergence. Because a lot of neurodivergent people can get a similar outcome to what neurotypical people want, but they aren't going to get it into the same process. See how these are things that are stacked against one group but kind of influence more as well. And also, did you know neurodivergent people come of all colors? And you, I'm talking to my fellow pales. Okay. Because in my research study, which was on white, black men and women who have experienced class mobility through employment, almost all of them had experienced this one right way. 94% being the highest group, which was black women. I had to say African American because it was in the US, and a committee member who was a black woman, by the way, but she was from Canada, said you need to be very specific that this is who you are talking about. You can see that a lot of every group that I talked about, people from the working class who'd experienced class mobility, ran into this frustration of only one right way being rewarded. There is inherently narcissism in believing that you have figured out the only way to do something and everyone else is wrong and that there's no other way to do it. That is inherently part of whiteness and in part of a lot of isms. The irony is, as an IO psychologist, I'm always looking at how does it impact people and companies. This is the antithesis to innovation. This is not how you improve any processes. This is not how you stay up to date on anything. This is not how you rise to meet new challenges. It's just stagnation and forcing something over and over again. And like such a small group of people are benefiting from this. And yet, a lot of people who have aspects of privilege aren't even in the top 10%, but we're paler, for example. We'll uphold this because we're saying, oh, well, you didn't get in because you just didn't do the right thing. Your hair wasn't professional. You didn't disagree in a way that I was comfortable with, even if you were correct. All of these things are extremely narcissistic. And so I'll leave you with this quote that I put in my book. In chapter 7 on the unwritten rule of compliance, which is the unwritten rule that nobody can disagree with you, even if you pretend to ask them. Chapter in my book, I have a class section, neurodivergent, a gender section, and a race section. At the end of the race section in this chapter, I say, so how is code switching different from cultural competence? I would argue that it is about power. If only one party is expected to learn the other's culture, it's code switching. If you are getting to know someone else and understand how and why their behaviors are different than yours, then that is cultural competence. If we share the emotional labor, we are learning about each other. If you are forced to be like me, then I'm just a pompous ass.